Tanzania's Electoral Commission says ruling party candidate John Magufuli has won the presidential election, but the opposition is alleging fraud. A U.S. congresswoman wants America to do more to tackle the Africa refugee crisis. And business is back in the streets of Monrovia as human and car traffic compete for space in an Ebola-free Liberia. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Linor Mudu. This is Africa 54. Tanzania's ruling party candidate John Magufuli has been declared the winner of Sunday's presidential election. The national electoral body dismissed opposition complaints about the process and a demand for a recount. In a hotly contested race, the main opposition parties united for the first time in a coalition to back a single candidate, former Prime Minister Edward Lowassa. Africa 54's Vincent Makori has been closely following this election from Tanzania, and he joins us live via Skype from Dar es Salaam. Good evening, Vincent.
Good evening, Lenore. Now, following that announcement that John Pombe Magufuli has won the presidential race, I spoke to January Makamba, is the Chama cha Mapinduzi, the National Executive Member and Assistant Minister of Information, Science and Technology, for some reaction.
We're very excited about the outcome, and we really this is a debt, and that we have acquired, the trust that the Tanzanians have reposed in our party by giving us a new mandate. We understand that this election was very contested, and we understand that Tanzanians have given our party another chance to lead them. Now it's time to unify the country, to bring everybody together and to deliver on our promises. So we celebrate this victory, in a very short span, and we start, going to work immediately.
Are you concerned at all about the opposition that has said it rejects this result?
No, because as you know, this is the fifth election since the reintroduction of multipartyism in 1995. And there was no single election where there were no complaints. So even when observers and everybody who was part of the election had declared that they were conducted, fairly, freely, peacefully and transparently, just as this election was declared. So we feel that, that as a country, as a continent, we need to build a new culture of accepting election results once they're out if you lose. And I think that, it's unfortunate that our opponent, have chosen a different path. But as a party, those we see them as, as our former opponents. Now they're all Tanzanians. They are not our enemies. And we will work with them and will deliver development for all.
What do you tell those who voted for the opposition?
That, CCM has won. We appreciate and understand that they made a different choice, but we'll serve them as Tanzanians as well.
Well, now for some reaction from the youth, I also spoke to Vincent Makori, the Executive Director, Center for Economic Prosperity, who was an agent at one of the polling stations. Would you consider the entire process, the election, the vote counting and the results as a fair, free and credible process?
Well, I think one thing that can give, if you can give a beam of light onto that circumstance, I think political parties have concerns that in some constituencies the number of votes that we actually presented to the Electoral Commission by the returning officers is not the one that actually was actually counted at the constituency level. So for this election to be free and fair, I think the National Electoral Commission has to give a room for the opposition parties to counter-check those numbers presented to the Electoral Commission And those numbers that were recorded in the election form results, of course there is a duplicate forms that normally the political party agents, when they sign the original copy, the duplicate actually shows the same number. If there is differences, and I think there is a need to clear the veracities of these numbers so that everyone is comfortable with the results.
Do you fear for the future of Tanzania?
Well, I don't. I think we'll move forward, and that is the best of our interest. Political parties pass away, but Tanzania will remain. We hope that these election results may not put our country on an edge of dissolution. We don't want that to happen.
So, Vincent, after the official results have been announced, how are people reacting in Dar es Salaam? What is the situation like?
Members of the opposition are extremely frustrated. Those who voted for them feel that they've been cheated out of this election. But of course, for those who voted for the ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi, it's jubilation. Across Tanzania, on the neighborhoods of Dar es Salaam, people are dancing, people are jubilating in different forms, and they feel that for them, it has been validated that Chama cha Mapinduzi is still a relevant party in this country, and that it's a party that has not only led this country up to this point, but has promised to do things rather differently. And people believe that message, apparently, for those who voted. The opposition has a different view. It feels that they got majority of the votes, but that something was done to cheat them out of this election. Any words of
if the opposition will take any legal actions? Can they take any legal actions?
By law, they cannot take any legal action. The Electoral Commission chairman is the god in this election process. There is no legal recourse. You cannot go to any court once it says that so-and-so is the winner. It is final, and that is it. So they are very frustrated. They were hoping that they can at least perhaps make, a protest against the Electoral Commission. They could do that on the streets. But up to this point, we haven't seen anything very significant. Okay. But that is how things are.
And quickly, before we go, the situation to watch now is Zanzibar.
Exactly, the situation towards Zanzibar, and I also want to pay attention to the fact that the United States has released a statement where it said the Zanzibar process election was credible, and there was no reason to cancel those elections. That was also the verdict of all the international observer teams. They released a joint statement today, and they're saying the election is acceptable. There is no reason to have canceled those elections. Everything should be taken back to how it was before this announcement was made.
Vincent, excellent reporting. Thank you so much. And that was Vincent Makori reporting live via Skype from Dar es Salaam. Now, the Nigerian army has revealed its 100 most wanted Boko Haram suspects. The army's chief of staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, publicized the names on Wednesday, and according to media reports, he says the troops on the front lines are doing all they can to put an operational end to the counterterrorism war. General Buratai also said the insurgents had been greatly decimated. He urged Nigerians to show patriotism and support the military by providing information that would lead to the arrest of suspected Boko Haram insurgents. President Muhammadu Buhari has made destroying Boko Haram a top priority in his administration. The U.S. military has started training units of Niger's army in what a U.S. official calls a new wave of military support for African states battling Boko Haram militants. Training is also scheduled for other African militaries. For more details on this story, VOA's Carla Bab joins us live via Skype from the Pentagon. Carla, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. As always, good to see you.
And good to see you too. Now tell us, what do you know about this training that is ongoing?
Well, as a U.S. Africa Command spokesman was explaining it to me, there's been small training in Niger before, but nothing quite as big as what's going to be going on now. Starting October 19th, U.S. Army soldiers came in, about 40, and they're training about 150 troops from Niger's armed forces. They're going to be going through basic training, marksmanship for small arms and that nature. And once they're done with that training, it's going to take about 8 weeks, 2 months. There's going to be a break, and then the U.S. Air Force is going to come in, and some of the airmen are going to train those same 150 troops on how to protect airfield ground, airfield security measures, and they're going to be working with them on that.
So is the main goal specifically to fight Boko Haram, or is there a bigger picture to this training?
You know, that's a good question, because obviously Boko Haram is on everyone's minds, but it's not really the goal. The goal is just for the United States to come in and help Niger become a better, more secure place. The United States isn't saying, well, you have to use it to fight Boko Haram. They're not doing that. But of course, they want them to use it, whether it's on protecting themselves and their borders or protecting it in the global fight against extremists. You know, Niger has a lot of problems. They've got up in Algeria, there's Al-Qaeda there. There's chaos going on in Libya, several different extremist factions there. And then there's Boko Haram to the south. So Niger needs to be secure. It's a relatively stable place, and the United States wants to help them stay that way.
And quickly, the training will expand beyond Niger, right?
Yes, a U.S. official has told me that what's going on in Cameroon right now, it's going to be surveillance right now, but that will expand and evolve into some training for the Cameroon military. And also, there's going to be some training in Chad and even in Nigeria. I know that was a big deal last year when training started in Nigeria, and then it was canceled because the Nigerian government wanted to cancel it. But I have heard that training is going to start there again.
Okay, Carla, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. And that was VOA Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb reporting live via Skype. African migrants continue to make the perilous journey to Europe, hoping for a better life. Hundreds have lost their lives at sea trying to reach Europe, but this has not deterred many others from risking their lives. Many of those fleeing Africa are from Eritrea, Somalia, and Nigeria. Africa 54's Esther Gitui-Ewart is in the studio to tell us more. Esther?
That's right, Leno. As the world grapples with the ongoing refugee crisis, a ranking member of the U.S. Congress is raising awareness on the plight of African refugees. Touched by how many Africans continue to lose their lives, U.S. Congresswoman Karen Bass, who is a ranking member of the Africa Subcommittee, organized a discussion to specifically address the African migration problem. And in an exclusive interview with Africa 54, she said the U.S. needs to increase the number of African refugees admitted in the country.
What sparked my concern is that the attention has shifted. A year or so ago, everybody was focused on Africans. There was that one boat accident, a horrific accident, in which 800 migrants died. And since then, the issue has been about Syria, and I think the significance of African refugees has kind of slipped off the agenda.
I asked Congresswoman Karen Bass what she personally thought was the root cause of so many Africans leaving their countries and risking their lives in the high seas.
The situation, for example, of Eritreans leaving is one thing, but when Libya fell, certainly a lot of the sub-Saharan Africans that were in Libya were mistreated. They left for different reasons. So I think it's really important that we not paint it with one brush. We look at people leaving each country in a different manner for those specific root causes. And we certainly know that some people are leaving out of economic desperation.
She says most of the Africans are fleeing persecution, ungovernable situations, and instability that exists in several places. But what does the Congresswoman think should be the role of the African Union in addressing the crisis?
I actually think the African Union and the United Nations are addressing the crisis, but it's really important to hear specifically what they are doing. And as the Syrian crisis has reached such extreme proportions, with 50% of the country's population displaced, which is incredible, I don't want that to overshadow the specific situations that are facing African countries.
Congresswoman Bass says that even though she has confidence policymakers are taking the crisis seriously, there's a need to examine the role of the United States to say exactly what the U.S. is doing, not just in bringing refugees into the country, but also addressing the root causes of why people are leaving their countries.
I have full confidence that the policymakers are taking it seriously. But what I want to hear out of this policy conference, what are the numbers? Where are the Africans?
The United States this year admitted 25,000 African refugees, but there is a call for the U.S. to increase that number and do more to tackle the refugee crisis.
Now, in our next segment on the Africa migration and refugee crisis, panelists express hope that the upcoming meeting between the European Union and the African Union will come up with concrete proposals to stem the crisis. Lenore, back to you.
Thank you so much, Esther. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54, and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming out, the Niger Delta faces endemic conflict despite being endowed with 90% of Nigeria's oil wealth. Stay with us.
News and notes. This is Living Better.
Scientists are looking at new ways of treating people who get malaria. The disease is caused by the one-celled Plasmodium parasite carried by a female mosquito.
The parasite infects into red cells, divides within them, and then eventually destroys the red cells and escapes.
That's Professor Mike Blackman with London's Francis Crick Institute. His team has discovered how the malaria parasite uses its own surface protein to break out of the blood cell. They say this is a significant finding, and they want to find a way to prevent the parasite from escaping the cell.
We think that this is a discovery which will allow us to design new drugs that kill the parasite in a new way, and that's very important when it comes to overcoming the problems of drug resistance.
The World Health Organization says there were almost 200 million malaria cases worldwide in 2013. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
The Niger Delta region produces most of the oil wealth for Nigeria, about 90% of the national income. But the region faces many challenges such as administrative neglect, crumbling infrastructures, high unemployment, poverty, and endemic conflict. Observers say efforts must be increased to improve the living conditions in the region. The Foundation for Partnership Initiatives in the Niger Delta seeks to achieve a legacy of sustainable peace and development among communities in the Niger Delta. Joining us in the studio is Ese Emery, Manager of Advocacy for Niger Delta Development, PEND Foundation. Ese, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
So how do you promote development in the region that is so much affected by everything that I said earlier, poverty, conflict, and everything else?
Yeah, so for PEND Foundation and NDPI in particular, we understand all of these challenges, and so we know that there is no one approach to it. And our approach is using partnership to help solve some of those solutions. It's going through sort of self-discovery with government agencies, government representatives, CSOs, private sector, and local communities as well, to come up with solutions that are homegrown to addressing a lot of these solutions. We know that we don't have the answers alone, and so that's why we try to emphasize on our partnership model to address these issues.
What are some of those solutions specifically?
So specifically with PEND Foundation, we work under 4 specific programs. Our economic development program has 4, we work on value chains, palm oil, cassava, and aquaculture programs. These are economic programs to help increase the economic stability within the region, teaching around best practices on aquaculture, teaching around best practices on cassava, and then demoing these and piloting them across the 9 states in the region. Under our capacity building program, we train CSOs specifically around some basic administrative and financial management for their institutions so that they are able to absorb grants or aid coming in from multinational organizations and can be able to implement these projects on their own sustainably.
But there are some people who believe that organizations, international organizations, even local organizations have tried. There have been many attempts of developing the Niger Delta region, but yet the situation is still dire. What are you doing different?
One of the things that we're doing different is not coming in with the answers. So we are insisting that the answers are actually homegrown with our partners and with our communities. We are definitely going through the approach of learning and using a market-driven approach in terms of understanding the systemic root causes of some of these issues, especially around security and peace. So one of the programs that PIN has is a Partnership for Peace program, which is an integrated peace effort that combines conflict mitigation, peace building in all of the 9 states. So we have chapters in all of the 9 states with over 30 sub-chapters training peace agents. We have now over 30,000 peace agents around conflict mitigation. So they know the issues within their communities. They can come to us with solutions, and we just help to empower them to actually leverage those opportunities for those communities.
Are you able to measure impact?
Yes, I think so, definitely. So the PIN Foundation has been in the Niger Delta for 5 years now. And 5 years is not a long time. We're still relatively new within the development scene. But in those 5 years, I think we have been able to record peace, especially in the regions. I know this past presidential election and the state government elections, violence was not as high as it has been in previous elections. Okay. And I think we can attribute some of the success to that from a lot of our...
And quickly, you're having the Niger Delta Development Forum. Quickly, what is this about?
Yes, sure. The Niger Delta Development Forum is part of our advocacy strategy and efforts in highlighting issues within the Niger Delta, actually stimulating dialogue to bring investments into the region. There are people who are working and living in the region, and so we want to definitely promote investments into the region. So we had the Washington, D.C. Forum was just held yesterday, where we brought together private sector investors, CSOs, and government officials as well to actually talk systematically about how do we attract investment into the region. We'll follow this conversation up in 2 weeks with another Niger Delta Development Forum, which will be hosted in Asaba, Delta State, which is one of the oil regions, to also continue this conversation about investments for the region.
And we'll continue the conversation, indeed. Thank
Definitely.
You so much.
Thank you for having me on
here. And that was Vincent Makori. She is the manager of advocacy for Niger Delta Development, PIN Foundation. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the streets of Monrovia return to life in a post-Ebola Liberia. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Tanzania, the National Electoral Commission releases results showing that ruling party leader John Magufuli wins the presidential vote. In Egypt, the second round of parliamentary voting closes with low turnout reported from the first phase at 26%. In Cameroon, protesters set fire to military vehicles in retaliation to strict controls enforced on area due to Boko Haram. The African Standby Force in South Africa, an army created to prevent humanitarian crises, conducts final training exercise before beginning operation. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. VOA reporter Jackson Vungani just returned from Liberia, where he witnessed firsthand the country's post-Ebola recovery efforts. Jackson?
Liberia has lost over 4,500 people to Ebola, and the country is struggling to recover from the recent epidemic that most accounts caught them off guard. Meanwhile, life is returning to normal in the capital city of Monrovia. Businesses are open, and both car and human traffic are competing for space in the city of over 1 million inhabitants. On my recent trip to Monrovia, I met with 2 young college students to talk about how Ebola affected their city and how they are getting on with life now that Liberia is Ebola-free. When I visited the 2 friends in Monrovia, they insisted on taking me to see their favorite spot in the city. It is a shell of a building that was once a hangout spot for the who's who in Liberia's socio-political scene. But those days are over now. The top floor of the old Duco Hotel is said to be the highest point in Monrovia.
This was one of the most beautiful hotels in the whole of West Africa.
Really?
Yeah.
And what happened to it?
And the war we had, the Civil War came, everything was looted out of here.
Against the backdrop of the Atlantic Ocean, David shows me the West Point neighborhood
West
below.
Point. That's the West Point.
That's West Point. That's where they quarantined. That was like a hot spot for Ebola.
For Ebola.
Okay.
Yes. And then around it, they cycled the community, and then they kept the people in there. They were bringing food and stuff.
And nobody was allowed to get outside.
Nobody was allowed to get outside until the 21 days is over.
How many people died in there, you know?
Oh my God. A lot of people died there. Every other day there was a death. We had death through 1 month straight.
Like many people in Liberia, David had his doubts when he first heard about Ebola. But the death of his close friend, a nurse at a local hospital, shocked him to understanding the threat.
It was July 24th. And he told me, David, I'm coming at your house on the 26th, on the Independence Day. So he said, I'm coming for us to chill.
David did not make it to see his friend Isaac. Meanwhile, he learned later that everyone who had come into contact with Isaac, including his family and friends, contracted Ebola and later died.
After a week, Isaac died. I heard the death news that he died. I was kind of shocked. What happened? And my friend told me that, Isaac caught Ebola and died. So after another 2 weeks, I heard that his sister died, his daughter died, and the mom also died. The friends that got in contact with him, all of them died. I was just shocked about that. In that moment, I started to take serious precaution.
According to most accounts, there was widespread skepticism about Ebola in the 3 West African countries. Many people refused to believe that the threat was real. Nathaniel, who first heard of Ebola on a crowded cab ride in Monrovia, remembers the skeptics.
Some of them, they were in complete denial. As a matter of fact, they said that Ebola didn't exist and it was a man-made virus. And so they were completely against taking precaution.
Lenore, I found that many people were generally skeptical of any information coming from government officials, which made recovery effort hard and also which made health interventions and response to the epidemic hard. And I think many people have overcome that mistrust, which is why Liberia is now Ebola-free. Lenore?
Great reporting, Jackson. Thank you so much. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 300 and 600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching, and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute, where we teach you all about idioms in American English. What do you think this means? Let's listen.
Keep my fingers crossed.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Actually, I just had a great job interview the other day. I really hope they hire me.
Oh, have you heard back from them?
No, not yet, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully, they'll call me today.
They sound very hopeful, and that's exactly what it means. In American English, keeping your fingers crossed means that you are hoping for the best possible outcome. This is a happy expression, and you can use it in any situation, formal and informal, and everybody will understand what you mean. And that's English in a Minute.